Was it entertaining? Yes, but was it racing?
It was odd. It kind of looked like Mario Kart.
That doesn't scream pinnacle of racing to me. I think he knew in that moment there was a communication breakdown.
That's a really tough track for the spotters to spot at.
Do you think he needs to temper that aggression and bring it down?
I think this is very similar to the Hocevar situation that we have on the NASCAR side.
It's these two conflicting portions of what makes the sport the sport. Who wins out? Out of the booth, if one of you has to drive and one of you has to be the passenger.
There's no possible way I'm letting Boyer drive. I mean, have you seen his attention span?
Said perfectly, Kevin. I don't think I can add anything to that. Hello and welcome to Speed with Harvick and Buxton.
Let's talk racing.
Well, hello everyone, and welcome to Speed with Harvick and Buxton, fueled by Poet.
Let's talk some racing, Will.
Let's do that, my friend. While you are comfortably on a couch in Jackson Hole and I'm in the studio, what better opportunity than to fly through everything that happened in the world of racing this week. And we will start with INDYCAR, because it was a Penske perfect weekend in the Desert Double, which began with a rip-roaring INDYCAR race that saw Josef Newgarden take the victory from Kyle Kirkwood and David Malukas. Malukas having started from his first ever INDYCAR pole. It was a thrilling 250-lap race of varying strategies and exceptional racing, with the star of the show being Christian Rasmussen, who fought from the back, making 61 on-track passes. It was his final move, however, which proved to be his undoing. Contact with Will Power, damaging his car and sending him backwards. Alex Palou crashed early on, and so for the first time in more than 620 days, we have a new championship leader. Race winner, Josef Newgarden.
Yeah, and what was great for Josef Newgarden to be able to put that Penske car in victory lane was not so great for Alex Palou, who isn't the championship points leader. And in my opinion, and we'll get into this later, probably did that to himself, could have prevented that accident.
Looking forward to discussing that one and your take on it, mate. Sunday saw the NASCAR Cup Series take to the track, and again, it was Penske on top as Ryan Blaney recovered from two loose wheels to win a race that tied a Phoenix Raceway record for cautions at 12. Blaney, who came from the back twice, took over the lead from Ty Gibbs after the final caution and ran to the flag to stop Tyler Reddick's run of consecutive wins and cut his championship lead by 10 points, moving into second in the championship at the same time. Kevin, great race.
It was a great race, and Ryan Blaney put on a clinic from the back twice with his pit stop problems and everything that they had going on pit road. But in the end, he had one of the fastest two cars and was able to have the right strategy at the end. But we tore up everything that you could possibly tear up this weekend, and for us, that was great because it created a really exciting event.
Great event, I think, for both INDYCAR and NASCAR for that double. Roger Penske celebrating 60 years in the sport, bringing home 2 poles, 2 wins. Let's move now to Formula One and the season opener in Melbourne. Fears over the new technical regulations proved both well-founded and, ironically enough, partially misplaced. Were there issues? Yes, absolutely. And the sight of F1 drivers lifting and coasting on the straights in practice and qualifying was galling. But the race, certainly in the opening laps, was hugely entertaining as the Mercedes and Ferraris battled it out on track. Sadly for the fans, an apparent strategy blunder from Ferrari robbed us of the chance to see that battle continue throughout the contest, as George Russell swept to an easy win over his teammate Kimi Antonelli.
Well, when you look at you talk about the Ferrari blunders, that doesn't seem to be anything new from the outside looking in with the strategy and things that they've gone through over the last few years. So that I don't think that surprised anybody. I think that George Russell, dominant with everything that he did. The Mercedes was obviously laying in the weeds with all the testing and things that were happening.
In Formula 2, Paraguay's Joshua DURKSEN won the sprint race for Invicta Racing, while Bulgaria's NIKOLA TSOLOV claimed the feature race and the early championship lead. Formula 3 began its season as well, with Bruno Delpino winning a shortened sprint race after a heavy crash between teammates James Wharton and Louis Sharp. In the feature, American UGOCHUKWU took his first F3 victory ahead of Britain's Freddie Slater to leave Melbourne as the early championship leader. Melbourne also saw 4 races for supercars, with Brody Kostecki absolutely obliterating the field to win 3 of the 4 races on the weekend. And he was ill, pouncing on a late race mistake from Will Brown in Sunday's finale to seal the win and take the championship lead after Brock Feeney was involved in a crash at the start. NHRA's 75th anniversary year kicked off at the GATORNATIONALS in Gainesville and set the tone for the year ahead with big nitro performances, tight qualifiers, and a reminder that the battles for the crowns are going to be hotly contested. After rain delayed the finals, Josh Hart beat Doug Kalata to top fuel honours to record a win for the Force family in the first race, with no members of the family actually racing themselves for the first time in 50 years. In Funny Car, Chad Green won for the second year in a row. Pro Stock went the way of Matt Hartford, and in Pro Stock Motorcycle, Richard Gadsden defeated John Hall. In the Mint 400, Carl Jergensen took a dramatic overall win in the Unlimited race, completing the brutal course outside Las Vegas in 6 hours and 47 minutes to complete the victory over a stacked field. Our man Jimmy Johnson survived a roll in qualifying and ran the first 2 laps of the contest before handing his truck over to Troy Herbst, the pair finishing 6th in class and 12th overall after more than 7.5 hours of competition. In the World Rally Championship, Hyundai have made it clear that their priority is improving the performance of their 2026 car, and in the same breath confirming they are still no closer towards making a decision on whether they will enter a car built for the new 2027 regulations next season. Of the existing teams in the WRC, only Toyota is locked in for next year. And finally, the World Endurance Championship has cancelled its planned season opener in Qatar due to the ongoing tensions in the region. The season opener will now be at Imola in Italy in April. And that's a look at the biggest stories from around the racing world this week, but we're just getting started here on Speed. Kevin, we're going to dive deep on topics that we're passionate about, and I think for you, mate, under the hood this week is something that you mentioned earlier, driver etiquette, the difference between NASCAR and INDYCAR. What did you see over the weekend in Phoenix that particularly caught your eye?
Well, I think that the thing that caught my eye the most were the willpower incident with Rasmussen and Palou when he got himself turned into the wall. So when I look at these incidents right here and you see that car up on the outside, in NASCAR, if that front tire or wing is to that rear wheel, you give them the spot. And I think from the driver's standpoint, you got to recognize that car is out there. And I know that looks like a late move, but you've got to see that car coming. And I think on the ovals, the IndyCar etiquette, I've raced a lot of karts and seen a lot of kart races and a lot of open wheel races on the road courses and things. I think you can get away with the etiquette that these guys expect, but you've got to protect your vehicle. You've got to keep yourself in the race. You've got to keep going. And sometimes it's self-defense and trying to not put that car in the wrong spot. This is a late move, but from the spotter and the driver, in my opinion, you've got to recognize that a lot sooner.
Yeah, there's 2 major incidents, weren't there, in Phoenix in the IndyCar race. The first was the incident that took Alex Palou out of the race. Rinus VeeKay running high, trying to put that move on him. Palou sliding up towards the wall and ultimately exiting the race as a result of that. Then, the really big one was Rasmussen after his incredible drive. Again, this was for the lead, trying to pass Will Power. And again, real inches in it, going for that outside move on the high line, and Power just sliding up a little bit. Power ultimately getting a flat rear right. Rasmussen's car so damaged that he ended up falling down the field to finish 14th after a brilliant run. What was fascinating for me was we had Joey Logano with us in the booth, and Hinch and Townsend called it, certainly in the case of Palou, that it was probably more on Rinus VeeKay. I think with Will Power and Christian Rasmussen, it was kind of 6 of one, half a dozen of the other. But again, Rasmussen as the driver coming to make the pass, the onus is on him to make the move cleanly. Joey saw it a totally different way. And I think more in line with your thinking, which is if there's the guy up high and you have left that gap such that he can get his nose in there, you got to give the space.
I would agree. And I think that's just a difference in the way that the etiquette of the two series has worked throughout the years. And in NASCAR racing, you got to keep yourself going. You don't want to put yourself in the fence like that. And I actually think the Palou incident was probably worse than the Will Power incident in being the front car. I think that when you go back and you listen to Palou's radio, you can immediately listen and hear. That's the expectation, is for that back car to be in control, because the spotter never said a word. And in NASCAR, the spotter would be outside, looking outside. But there was none of that on Palou's radio. So I actually think that incident was even more on Palou than the Will Power incident, especially, racing for the lead. So just the difference in the two series. But I think that you could definitely, both of those accidents could have been prevented from both drivers. But I think when you're that lead car and you look in that mirror and the spotters being late to those calls or not even calling them, really puts those drivers in a tough spot. But I just think that oval racing is a little bit different than the road racing etiquette. And I think that as you go forward, I would protect my car and make sure that I don't wreck, to give yourself a chance to fight in the next corner.
Yeah, I have to say I agree with you. Road and street courses, even having your front wheels alongside the guy you're trying to pass's rear wheels isn't really enough of a car alongside for the driver in front to back down. You need to be a good kind of 30 to 50% alongside, maybe even totally side by side, to really claim a corner as being your own. But oval racing is a completely different discipline. And as we know, you're racing at tremendously high speeds. As we saw in the case of Will Power, the opportunity to have a tire cut down at those speeds just from a hit of a front wing is tremendously high. And I think what was really telling with the interview with Alex Palou was, as he watched the replay, there was no there was no apportioning of blame from Palou towards VK in that moment of, what did he think he was doing? I think he knew in that moment there was a communication breakdown between himself and his spotter, because he could quite clearly see that VK was coming and he'd never been told about it, to your point. That falls down then on communication, because had Palou known, he probably would have given more space. And then guess what? He's still in the race and maybe doesn't lose his championship lead.
Yeah, and in the spotter's defense there, that's a really tough track for the spotters to spot at, because the spotter stand is in the middle of turns 3 and 4. So you're actually looking at the cars going away from you. In the Will Power incident, it's really hard as well, because same scenario. Those spotters are looking at the car. You're typically in the middle of the racetrack at the start-finish line, or in the middle of the straightaways, so that you have a better view of those corners. And tough scenario. I think that from the NASCAR side of the world, ultimately you're responsible for your car, and the spotter is there to help you. I think in IndyCar, it's a little bit harder to see out of those mirrors, and things are happening a little bit faster on the racetrack. But I'm with you, Will. I think both of these incidents could have been prevented with a little better communication, and I think that it's also a really tough track for the spotters because of their view.
A word on Rasmussen: 61 positions gained, but at what point is discretion the better part of valor? Because had he backed out of that move with Power, and Rasmussen has created a reputation for himself where he is all or nothing, right? And if he's going for a move, whether he's trying to take the lead or whether he's lapping a driver on a short oval, it is no quarter given. He will brush the wall if he has to. Do you think he needs to temper that aggression and bring it down 5-10% when he's making those big moves? Or do you love watching the way that he races? Because part of me thinks this is going to only solidify the way that he races, and he's not going to back down. Will that stop him from becoming as successful as ultimately he could be?
I think this is very similar to the Hocevar situation that we have on the NASCAR side with the aggression, and I think that you wind up crashed more than you should. You're spectacular coming through the field. You're spectacular putting yourself in those crazy spots. But when it comes down to the moment where you have a chance to win the race, and I believe he had more time. I think he could have been more patient. I'm still 50-50 on the willpower Rasmussen situation. I think that is not as defined as the Palou incident was in being preventable. I think that if he waits a little bit right there and gives himself a better, cleaner chance to pass, that's not just, from the 3/4 mark of the corner all the way to the exit and ultimately winding up in the fence with both cars, you take yourself out. So, I think I was in this position as well. You want to be aggressive, you want to be the show, you want to be spectacular and do all these things that everybody loves. But in the end, you're there to win. And sometimes you have to be smart and you have to be able to survive and put yourself in a spot to get to the end of the race. Last lap, maybe that's a great move and chance worth taking. But with that many laps left to go, I think you have to try to be smart about things. So exciting, but in the end, you got to be smart and you got to make sure that your car is intact in order to have a chance to win.
Yeah, that's the thing, man. 61 passes on the day, but the only one that really mattered was the 62nd, and it didn't happen.
Yeah,
and that ultimately
failed.
Cost him the day in the race.
Well, on a different subject, Will, I know you feel strongly about everything that's happening in F1, and we saw just a wild start to the season, and I think it lived up to all of the things that you're worried about.
Yeah, mate. Formula One's much hyped new regulations finally hit the track this weekend at the Australian Grand Prix. And from drivers to fans, the early reaction was not quite what the sport would have hoped for. A lot's changed in 2026. Gone is DRS, the drag reduction system, a controversial rear-wing device that allowed cars to blast past rivals on the straights. Critics called it a gimmick. Supporters said it created overtaking. The cars themselves this year are also smaller and slightly lighter. Not dramatically so, but enough that drivers suggested during testing that they might actually be more enjoyable to drive. Aerodynamics have changed too. The cars now feature active aero, switching between corner mode, which generates downforce, and straight mode, which reduces drag. And unlike DRS, drivers can use this whether they're attacking or not. But the biggest change sits under the engine cover. The new power units are split evenly, half traditional V6 engine, half electrical power harvested during the lap, stored in the battery, and then deployed strategically. And it's this change that has created the biggest controversy. Because for a car to perform at its peak, the battery needs to be full. To charge it, drivers must harvest energy through braking, but also by lifting off the throttle. Which means we saw something unusual in Melbourne. Formula One drivers lifting off the gas halfway down the straight. Take Melbourne's famous curving back straight by the lake. It used to be flat out, a section that demanded total commitment before a fast left-right flick. In 2026, drivers were lifting hundreds of yards earlier than before, scrubbing around 40 miles an hour from their speed before even reaching the corner. And it wasn't just practice. Qualifying, the moment fans expect to see drivers pushing absolutely to the limit, followed exactly the same pattern. Drivers were quick to criticize the new rules. When the reigning champion said the cars had gone from the best to the worst, people started paying attention. Though, for the record, I'm not convinced last year's cars were anywhere near the best, but if you've just won a world championship, you're probably allowed a teeny little bit of bias. Still, the frustration wasn't limited to one driver. The criticism was widespread. So the big question on Sunday was simple. Would the racing save it? Well, yeah, but also no. The opening laps were dramatic. Melbourne saw more position changes in one race than it normally does across several races. But what exactly were we watching? Because while there were plenty of passes, many of them didn't look like overtaking in the traditional sense of what we understand it to be. Formula One removed DRS because fans and drivers wanted a return to the purity of the pass. Skill, bravery, late braking. What we saw instead often looked even more artificial. Positions changed because cars were harvesting and deploying energy in different places. A Ferrari might be lifting earlier, a Mercedes later, meaning wildly different speeds as they approached the same corner. In the past, drivers braked roughly at the same markers. The 150 board, the 100 board. Overtaking meant committing to brake later than a rival. Now, one driver might lift at 200, another at 250, another at 300, and that creates huge closing speeds and potentially dangerous ones. It also means drivers are spending more time looking at the complex data on their steering wheels than at the track itself. Take Lando Norris, for example. Over the weekend, he admitted that he hit debris from Kimi Antonelli's Mercedes because he was looking at his dash rather than at the road ahead. By the checkered flag, one word kept coming up: artificial. The feeling that passing resembled passing traffic on a highway, more than racing at what is supposed to be the pinnacle of motorsport. Interestingly, two teams seem pretty happy, Mercedes and Ferrari, which perhaps tells you everything you need to know. If Red Bull or McLaren had dominated the race, the tone of the criticism might sound a little different. But that's Formula One. It's the way it's always been. But when a team owner says the sport has lost its heart, a multiple world champion calls the engines shit, and even the Australian Grand Prix promoter labels the formula a disgrace, it's going to raise questions. Those quotes, by the way, are very real. They're just not from this weekend. They're from 2014, the last time Formula One introduced a major new engine formula. Back then, the reaction was just as fierce. The racing was uneven. The sport looked unsure of itself. But eventually, Formula One figured it out, as it always does. So after one race of a new set of regulations, is it too early to judge? Melbourne is believed to be one of the worst circuits on the calendar for this new energy harvesting system. This week's race in Shanghai at the Chinese Grand Prix may give us a clearer picture. Certainly, series bosses are reported to be waiting until after the race in China before deciding on what, if any, changes it needs to make. Formula One has always lived between two worlds, engineering on one side and entertainment on the other. But with a new fan base hungry for the latter, this is a sport with answers to find and seemingly some soul-searching to be done. Kevin, mate, I don't know what you thought of it, but the race on Sunday, it was intriguing. Was it entertaining? Yes, but was it racing, like as we understand racing to be?
It was odd. From just a casual fan standpoint. I follow Formula One and have followed Formula One for a number of years, and it all started right at the start. I think when you look at the start of the race, you had some cars that took off, some cars that didn't take off, and that's how the turbo spins up and who's able to get going, and then lifting down the straightaway. Just a lot of things that seem awkward, and I think when you get away from having an engine, tires, good drivers, and good teams to be able to make their cars performance, and it seems so over-engineered to me that nobody understands how to even make the car function correctly. And you've got this wide variety of people and teams that think that this is the best way to do it and that's the best way to do it. So it was one of the most awkward races that I've ever watched. And when you see a start like that has so many cars that are at different speeds, and I heard one of the drivers refer to it as Mario Kart, that's kind of what it looked like. It kind of looked like Mario Kart. And when I turn on an F1 race, I want to see who's got the fastest car, who can go down the straightaway the fastest, through the corners the fastest, who could make the fastest pit stop and the best calls. It mixed the field up, but it was awkward.
Whenever you get a new set of regulations in Formula One, the closeness always disappears and you get huge gaps between the teams. That's nothing new, and the longer the regulations stay the same, everybody always closes up. So I don't think the difference between the team's competitiveness, that shouldn't be a surprise. I think what is a surprise to the drivers as much as anybody is having to re-understand what racing is, having to relearn how to drive a car, and to think that, you know, you're a kid, right? And you want to get to Formula One, and you think every step of the way that you go up, the cars get bigger, louder, faster. You need more commitment, more bravery, more skill every single level you get up. To then think that you're 3/4 of a way down a straight and you've got to lift, coast. That's not the pinnacle. That doesn't scream pinnacle of racing to me.
I think that you look at Formula E, it's an electric car racing series. You look at Formula One, it's supposed to be the most badass car that you can put on the racetrack. And that anytime that you're trying to recharge your battery and do all these wild, crazy things that all the manufacturers wants, it takes the purity out of what the driver has to do and what the car has to do. And when you're seeing guys lift on the straightaway and do the things that they did this weekend, if I was a driver, I'd hate it too.
I mean, I loved the opening laps, right? I loved watching the Ferraris and the Mercedes swap positions and, you know, 2-3 times a lap, whatever it was. But when you break it down, how many of those were last on the brakes, you know, late to the corner, all arms and elbows, you know, making a move work out of sheer daring and guts and racing ability? And how much of it was down to the fact that one car's got a speed overrun on the other because the other guy's had to lift, charge his battery, and the other car just sort of flies his way through because he's got a little bit more power at that point. That's if we have to redefine our understanding of what constitutes racing and what constitutes overtaking, then is it racing and is it overtaking, or is it something else entirely?
It didn't look like it was pure better driver, better car. It appeared that way when you would just see the cars blow by, you know, on the straightaway or going into a braking zone for a different reason than just outbraking somebody. But I'll go back to when NASCAR has redesigned their car. We're in our 4th year now with the Gen 7 car, and you know, when we first had the car come on the racetrack, it was great racing. But then the teams figured out a lot of things, and it really exposed some of the weaknesses that the car has and has had. It's more of a sports car type base of a chassis, and NASCAR is in control a lot of those things. And I think that really took some of the things out of the drivers' hands that they want in their hands. And I think that the drivers having the input, and I think this year NASCAR has really listened to what the drivers are looking for in the race car. They've been searching for it from an aerodynamic side, really tough to achieve with this particular car that we are racing. So Formula One's going to have to listen to the drivers, because if the drivers aren't enjoying it, there aren't too many other people that have a microphone in front of their mouth that can give an opinion. The team bosses and the manufacturers in the series can give all the opinions that they want, but when the drivers don't like it and the drivers aren't having fun, and you've got a multi-time world champion in Max Verstappen saying he's going to go do something else because he just doesn't want to drive the car anymore, you've got a big problem.
There is an element of, you know, patting them on the head and saying, "Oh, you poor baby, you're being paid tens of millions of dollars a year to drive a Formula One car. Suck it up." Because anyone else in the world would gladly do it. They'd pay to do it, let alone be paid for the pleasure of doing it. And look, George Russell loved it. Lewis Hamilton loved it, you know, going out there and racing, because they're fighting at the front. You know, how much of this is just drivers being drivers and complaining because they don't have the fastest car, and how much of it is legit? And I think that's ultimately a question that will be answered in time. The fan reaction has been fascinating, but there is, and you bring it up, you know, do we listen to the manufacturers? Do we listen to the drivers? Who wins out in this scenario? Because the new regulations were responsible for, and let's be honest here, they were responsible for bringing Audi into the sport, and Audi did a great job. They scored points on debut in Australia. A phenomenal job from them to do that. You know, Cadillac have entered the sport. Toyota have kind of partially re-entered as a, you know, technical partner with Haas. Maybe they'll come back full time in the future. Honda, after deciding they were going to quit the sport, have come back. Admittedly, it's a disaster at the moment for them, but manufacturer interest in the sport came back and increased because they brought these new regulations in purely to appeal to them. But if that comes while sacrificing the purity of the sport and racing and what the drivers want and ultimately what the fans want, it's these two conflicting portions of what makes the sport the sport. Who wins out? Is it the manufacturers? Is it the drivers? Is it the fans? And that's a really tough one because you don't have one without the other. Does anybody in the real world care about the fact that it's 50% electrical energy and 50% from the engine? Is that going to affect in any way who goes out and buys a Mercedes or whatever other type of car they might want to buy on a Monday, having watched the thing race to victory on a Sunday? There's a huge level of soul searching, and Parker Kligerman wrote a really good article about it this week. Actually, who is racing for right now, and who are we trying to appeal to, and why, and who do we listen to when we're shaping the future regulations of the sport in order to create the best product that the fans are going to love? I think this is indicative of a far deeper question that exists within racing right now.
Well, when I go back to the early 2000s and I look at the stars that we had driving the cars and the personalities and everything that we had happening late 90s, early 2000s, all the way through, then we had Dale Earnhardt Sr.'s death. Then you had Tony Stewart retire. Then you had Jeff Gordon retire. Then you had Dale Earnhardt Jr. retire. I retired. Martin Truex Jr. retired. You got to have stars, and they got to be the ones driving the cars. And there's a huge passion for Ferrari and Mercedes in their country, just as a brand for the cars. But the drivers are the stars, and you start losing your stars and being able to put people in there that are just in the car because the car is easy to drive, and you can't make one guy better. One driver can't make his car better than the other guys because he's a better driver. Then you have a real problem creating stars. So I think it's a balance. Obviously the manufacturers want to develop stuff and make their car companies better, but in the end the drivers have to be the stars, and we've already been through that on the NASCAR side, and now we're in a new generation of drivers. We got a lot of great drivers with a lot of great personalities that can be stars.
And you make a really good point there. Formula One has built itself over the last 10 years, particularly through Drive to Survive, as being led by its stars, creating those stars, led by the personalities. They are the people who have brought this new fan base to the sport and given them a love and a passion for Formula One. I know from doing Drive to Survive on the inside, I've had to explain the complex parts of the sport and make it a bit simpler. But we've never gone into really discussing the technical regulations and, how the engines work and what percentage of power is coming from where, because that's not what the focus was. It was always on the stars, always on the personalities. If you're now having to describe straight mode, corner mode, super clipping, lift and coast, all these things that are completely foreign to an entire generation of people who've been watching Formula One and have been brought into it over the last decade on the basis of entertainment, star power, personality, it's how do you balance that? And I think that's a real problem.
It is a real problem. And yeah, it's something we could debate for hours. That's for sure.
We could, man. We could do hours on this. Okay, guys, now it's time to hear from you, the fans. You can reach out to us on @Speed on Fox on social media, or you can leave a voicemail, old school, 213-534-7107. And when you reach out with a question, let us know your name and where you're from. Right, first voicemail from Nolan in Stonington, Connecticut.
Hey there, this is Nolan from Stonington, Connecticut. If you could be the team principal of your own team, what motorsport series would you compete in? Who would be your drivers? And what would the team name be?
Ooh, that's a great question. I think for me, I've already been in the team ownership side from the truck series and Xfinity series and everything that we've done in the past. So I'd probably pick the Cup series with somebody else's money. I'd love to run the team and just make all the decisions because that is something that I enjoy. So I think we just have to go traditional and call it Kevin Harvick Incorporated. KHI like it used to be. So that's a pretty straightforward NASCAR Cup team.
Kevin, you didn't pick drivers.
Oh, you're gonna put me on the spot, aren't you?
Yeah, I mean
That's a tough
not
one.
me.
Well, yeah. Well, I think as a team owner, you got to have a leader of your team. So I think the best two guys in the garage right now are Denny Hamlin and Joey Logano as far as leading their organizations. Logano's a little younger than Denny Hamlin, so I'm going to go with Logano. And then I got to have a young guy, and I think the guy that's laying in the weeds is Corey Heim. I think that for whatever reason he is not in a Cup car, and he is somebody that I think can you can build and mold with the right situation. So that'd be my two choices right now.
Okay. There's it probably sounds like a cop out, but I'd take an IndyCar team because I genuinely love the championship. I think it's going places. I think the racing is super exciting, and I think that right now it's a great championship to invest in and to get sponsors involved with. Who's got the money to compete in Formula One? What's Cadillac spent so far? $1 billion or something like that?
Oh my gosh. Can you imagine? What can we do with that money?
Yeah, totally. How many teams in how many championships could you start with that kind of money? So no, I'd have an IndyCar team. I would try and convince Max Verstappen to join because it's Max. I mean, come on, who wouldn't love to see Max take on the Indy 500? And something a bit different for him. And I'm stealing Connor Zilic from you guys. I'm taking him away. And you never know. If we got those two, maybe we'd get Red Bull back in on board and have a Red Bull-backed Verstappen, Zilic super team in IndyCar. That would be great.
That'd be fun.
That'd be good, huh? Right, another voicemail from Jake in Whiteland, Indiana.
Hey, Kevin and Will. This is Jake Finley from Whiteland, Indiana. I had a question about IMS. Not that it would ever happen, but hypothetically ever, if Indianapolis Motor Speedway added lights to the facilities, what would you ever think about that in a hypothetical Indy 500 under the lights? Cheers.
I'll start. I think for me, I'm a traditional guy, and I think that the Indy 500 is in the spot time-wise during the day that it needs to be. Now, the thing that I would like to see lights added for is so that if you had a rain delay or you had something going on, you could postpone it and put it further into the evening. And I think it would be a really cool sight to see those cars under the lights at night. But I don't want the Indy 500 to be started at a different time with the way that weekend goes on Memorial Day weekend with F1, IndyCar, Coke 600. It's a pretty traditional weekend. So I'd have a tough time breaking that tradition, but the expense of lights is high, but I think it would be worthwhile so that you don't have to delay the race.
Said perfectly, Kevin. I don't think I can add anything to that. Totally agree. 100%. Question from Tim from the universe. That's going to be easy to send your bobblehead to if it's a good question. Could we ever get an IndyCar, NASCAR, and F1 on the same track over a weekend, or a reimagined speed week with all three? Good luck.
Could you imagine? Could you imagine the F1 sanctioning body and the NASCAR, IndyCar side of the world trying to sit down and negotiate something as to how they were going to split everything up? That would be made for a reality show with everybody trying to get their piece of the pie and who's the bigger star in town that weekend.
Yeah, who headlines that?
Yeah. Well, I think it's an interesting idea if you could ever make it work. And
dude, if you could make it work. If it's on viewership numbers, NASCAR headlines in the US, right? So is F1 going to be the support race to NASCAR? Nope, that's not going to happen.
No way. But I mean, you look at F1 with the way that the time and everything is split up. The difficult part are the crash barriers and things that are built for the F1 cars. Are they sturdy enough to take a NASCAR impact in some of those corners? And I think you could work through all that. But at a place like Vegas where they run in the middle of the night to fit their viewership audience, I mean, why couldn't you run a support race before that and do the things that IndyCar could do and give a great racing weekend? So I don't think it'll ever happen, but it sure would be fun.
You know what? I think Vegas is actually a really good shout because of the layout, the walls and the barriers and everything. I think it's probably the closest track to an IndyCar/NASCAR street track that there is on the F1 calendar. It's not a bad shout at all. I don't think it'd ever happen, but it's not a bad shout. But to your point, Kevin, like, you know, I used to love Monaco Coca-Cola-Napolis weekends. When you start with Monaco, then you'd have the Indy 500 and then the Coca-Cola 600, but not to be this year. But yeah, having them all on the same weekend, pie in the sky. But wouldn't it be great? Finally, Jack from Twitter. I don't think it matters where Jack's from because I don't think this is going to win the bobblehead. What's it going to take to get Harvick in the Indy two-seater?
Well, after listening to my friend this weekend, Clint Boyer, I'm not sure that it sounds like a great idea. I think it scared the crap out of him, but probably wouldn't take much. I don't think it would take much. I think I'd do it, no problem.
Out of the booth, if one of you has to drive and one of you has to be the passenger in an IndyCar two-seater, who's getting which honor? Who's going to get in the front seat? Who's getting in the back seat?
There's no possible way I'm letting Boyer drive. I mean, have you seen his attention span? His attention span is so short that he was literally in the booth this weekend. He didn't know where his suit was. They brought him his suit. And during the practice and qualifying broadcasts, my guy is standing next to me changing his clothes, trying to call qualifying. So he has a tough time focusing, but there's no way I'm riding with him. I'll drive and he can ride.
Love that. Brilliant stuff. Thanks, gang. What are we choosing for our favorite question of the week? I quite liked the ultimate team, 2 drivers, which championship?
I think I would go with that for sure. I think that is an intriguing question to ask and thought to think about. So I'm good with that.
Lovely stuff. Nolan, the bobbleheads are yours and will be coming your way. And we know we haven't sent them out yet. And that is because each one is being beautifully, individually handcrafted. These things will be collector's pieces. And we're expecting delivery of them within the next, I think, week or so? Something like that? Week, maybe? Cool. And then we'll get them sent out to you guys. Okay, time now for one of our favorite parts of the show, because each week Kevin and I pick a driver that we think has excelled as our driver of the week, or rider, depending. And Kevin, this week I went for Christian Rasmussen. We have discussed him already. Had that 60-second pass actually been carried out with without the contact with willpower. Maybe my argument would be a bit stronger, but such an enthralling racer, such an exciting guy to watch on track. And interestingly, given the way that he now approaches short ovals, there is a mindset and a theory going around the IndyCar paddock that people are going to have to adapt the way that they race to be able to compete with this guy because he's going about it in such a different way.
Well, he was definitely impressive, but I think for me, I'm going to go to the NASCAR side. I'm going to go to Ryan Blaney because he was able to make that last pass and go to victory lane. And I think for him to be able to come from the back of the field twice and just keep his head screwed on after having all those pit stop problems and everything that he was having to deal with, to mentally put himself in a position to win at the end was really impressive. And another shout out to 17-year-old Carson Brown, who won his first ARCA race at Phoenix on Thursday. But Ryan Blaney's my guy this week.
Love that. And the fans agree with you. Not even close. You're 3 for 3 now, aren't you? With your choice winning out.
No, Tomac. They didn't. I picked Tomac.
Oh, remember? Yeah. No, with 3 for 3 with NASCAR drivers winning, but not your choice. Yeah. Okay. 2 for you, 0 for me. Before we wrap, time for Next Lap, in which we look towards the races happening this weekend, and IndyCar heads to its 3rd race weekend in a row and to a brand new circuit in Arlington, Texas. Cannot wait to get there for this. So much work has gone into the venue, and it looks sensational. We'll be on air all the way through the weekend, but the race itself comes your way 12:30 Eastern Time live on Fox. NASCAR Cup Series heads to the Las Vegas Motor Speedway. That should be an absolute thriller. That is coming your way 4 p.m. Eastern. Also on Fox, Formula One heads to Shanghai and the China Grand Prix, the first sprint race weekend of their season. That's 3 a.m. I believe, on Sunday this weekend. And the World Rally Championship will be on the Safari Rally. So keep your eyes peeled for that. Kevin, big weekend of racing, particularly for INDYCAR as it heads to Arlington, and for you guys as you head to Vegas.
Yeah, such an important stretch for our guys on the Cup side. We went to Phoenix last week, 6 weeks in a row that you're going to chase tracks. So you need to make sure that you understand where your car is. But we haven't seen everybody on a 1.5 mile racetrack under the downforce conditions. So big weekend to see where everybody's at performance-wise.
Yeah, mate, quick one. Obviously, we'd had the super speedways going to the 1 mile oval at Phoenix. How happy were you with the way the tires, the horsepower, everything with the cars actually worked out there? And what do you think that holds in store for the 1.5 mile?
The horsepower really caught the guys off guard this weekend. They talked more about the horsepower, and I think you saw it in the race. You saw it with cars moving all over the racetrack. You saw it with more brake usage. You saw it with tire failures. You saw so many different things that happened this weekend that I think caught a lot of people off guard. I wish we could add another 150, 200 horsepower, because I think power fixes a lot of problems with racing in general when you put the horsepower back up. So back to the lower horsepower this weekend on the 1.5 mile. So our cars have actually put on really good shows on the 1.5 mile racetrack. So Vegas is a huge challenge, really bumpy track, worn out surface, going to be in the mid to high 80s this weekend. So the drivers will have to deal with a lot of heat.
They will indeed. As we were saying, INDYCAR Arlington, it is a brand new street circuit, one of 3 brand new street circuits this year. Arlington, Markham, and the big one, the Freedom 250 in Washington, D.C. The circuit has been announced and revealed. It's heading past the Smithsonian. It's heading past the Lincoln Memorial. Quite a track, I think. It's certainly in terms of what we're going to be racing past. Should be a really, really fun one. So great to finally see that one. Right, we will finish with overtime. Kevin, what's taken your focus this week from the wider world of sports?
Well, I hate to do this to you, but the World Baseball Classic, U.S. is up with 2 wins already. So it's fun to root and see. I actually went to the World Baseball Classic a couple of years ago, and the atmosphere, because of all the teams being a country, is absolutely amazing. And I had the best time. I believe we played Mexico in the game that we were in, but the rivalry between the fans and everything that you get to experience at this event is a lot of fun. So hopefully the U.S. keeps it rolling. Had kind of a cakewalk against some country this weekend, but that's just the way it goes for you, Will.
It's because we're more used to playing cricket, my friend. More used to playing cricket. Apparently, though, listen, I don't know much about Britain's baseball team, but apparently we're not that bad. But when you come up against the USA, what do you expect? What do you expect? Hey,
That's
listen,
right.
Mate, I'm taking the punches this week because I actually chose for my sporting performance of the week the Italian rugby team. Rugby, for those of you who aren't aware, is just like American football, but without helmets and pads. And you can't throw the ball forward; you have to throw it backwards. Italy beat England this week in the Six Nations. Yeah, man. Look, for those who don't know, the Six Nations is a rugby tournament. Happens every single year. It used to be the 5 nations, so England, Scotland, Wales, Ireland, and France. And Italy joined the contest 25 years ago and have been the perennial sort of wooden spoon winners because they just couldn't get a win. They were always seen as like the easy team to beat. But over the last few years, they've really started to just build and build and build. They started off this year's Six Nations with a win against Scotland. They've run big teams really, really close. And then they beat England at the weekend. And given, how much of a rugby nation England is, to have Italy beat them, hat tip to the Azzurri. Wonderful result, and great to see Italian rugby finally getting to where I think it's had the chance to be for many, many years. So, yeah. America beating Britain in baseball, Italy beating England in the rugby, and we'll take that.
Gotta love the upsets. You need SVG to come on here and talk to you about rugby. I like to watch it, don't really understand it, but he's a big rugby fan.
Love a bit of rugby, mate. I went to a rugby school. I was terrible at rugby. My mother said she'd never seen anybody run so fast on a rugby pitch in the opposite direction to the ball. That was me playing rugby. Right, folks, that's it for this week. But don't forget, we have our interview show coming a little later this week on Wednesday. Kevin and I got to sit down with two young guys making their debuts in their respective series this year. Connor Zilic from NASCAR Cup Series and Mick Schumacher making his debut in INDYCAR. It was a lovely chat. Two really great young men, and a joy to spend some time with them. Kevin, thanks so much for your time, mate. Go and enjoy the ski slopes. You said it's too hot and it's going to be slushy. I feel for you. Oh, I feel
that's
for
okay.
You. Stuck here in Charlotte.
It's still beautiful here, so I'm a slow skier, Will. So a little slush doesn't really bother me.
We will leave you with the best incidents of the week from Kevin and I. That's it for us for Speed with Harvick and Buxton, fueled by Poet.
Oh, contact around Gatto, and he collects Berry and Suarez. Bam! That's your pole sitter. Their day is done.
And you can just hear the violence of the wreck. And
wheel to wheel with the champion, and there's contact. That is the champion into the wall. Alex Palou, having led this championship for over 620 days, is out of this race.
Oh! Big crash.
Caution, still outside.
Couple of drivers for Joe Gibbs Racing involved.
You're already vulnerable, loose.
Oh, there's a crash.
Low. That thing turned. Oh boy, wicked fast, and that is a huge hit. Terrible angle, terrible angle of impact.
Off the road, into the barrier. Max Verstappen in the Red Bull.
Not even the cat-like reactions of Max Verstappen could do anything in that scenario.
What a rough one for Jimmy. Had a phenomenal run going.
Oh, Chastain's in trouble. Oh, and he collects 3 cars, smashing into the outside wall.
Huge hit for Alfredo and bigger for Cindric.
Cindric took a massive hit right there.
Sure did. This is going to hurt.
Oh.